The Magnificent Ambersons. Orson Welles' successor to Citizen Kane was positioned to be another landmark. But when The Magnificent Ambersons debuted in July of 1942, it was already a truncated version of the film he had delivered just a few months prior. RKO Pictures, rattled by negative test screenings in Pomona, California, removed more than 40 minutes and replaced Welles' planned ending without his go-ahead. Intended as a somber reflection on downfall and generational decline, it transformed into a strangely buoyant finale. Welles, meanwhile, was stationed in Brazil, filming a government-sponsored documentary titled It's All True for the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, maintaining sparse communication with the studio. As RKO's worries took over, his influence waned. In later interviews, including one for the BBC in 1982, he described it as the greatest heartbreak of his life, lamenting, "They ruined Ambersons." The studio's reworked conclusion introduced a hospital reunion between George Amberson Minafer and Eugene Morgan, complete with emotional music and a hasty redemption. Yet internal notes and existing drafts confirm that Welles' cut was far more dour, culminating in George alone and pensive, wandering through a decaying urban sprawl, a bleak emblem of aristocracy's collapse. Critics like Bosley Crowther of the New York Times noted the uneven tone, even as the film earned 4 Academy Award nominations. Those excised reels, which supposedly featured an extended depiction of the Amberson mansion's decline, were stored at RKO but later destroyed, probably between late 1942 and early 1943. Film authorities such as Jonathan Rosenbaum have termed it one of the most devastating losses in American film archives. Some suggest a complete copy might have survived in Brazil, where Welles shipped materials, but if so, it's never been uncovered. These events around Ambersons remain a cautionary tale of studio meddling, often listed alongside Greed from 1924 and Heaven's Gate from 1980. It also marked a definitive turning point in Welles' relationship with Hollywood. After Ambersons, the doors that had swung open following Citizen Kane began to close slowly but firmly. Still unanswered is whether that genuine ending was lost forever, or if audiences never stood a chance of witnessing it. Double Indemnity. Double Indemnity nearly ended with a much more explicit finale. Early accounts claim it included a final scene where Walter Neff meets his death in the gas chamber, though no actual footage corroborates it. What we do know is that director Billy Wilder and co-writer Raymond Chandler toyed with harsher conclusions before landing on the version that reached theaters in 1944. That cut ends with Neff collapsing after confessing, striking a balance between the story's dark fatalism and the rigid guidelines of the Hays Code. Certain academic voices maintain that omitting Neff's final punishment from view wasn't just about censorship, it might also have been a calculated choice to keep the film's psychological tension alive. Gossip has endured for many years about a grimmer wrap-up, but no confirmed alternate rendition has ever surfaced. Meanwhile, Edward G. Robinson's character, Barton Keyes, was granted a strengthened finale, possibly reinforcing the film's moral boundaries. Intentionally or otherwise, the released version left just enough lingering questions to keep audiences debating Neff's fate long after the screen went dark. Casablanca. Casablanca, released in 1942, the ending that became iconic wasn't always the plan. Early drafts reportedly explored multiple possibilities, including one where Rick and Ilsa escaped together, leaving Victor Laszlo behind. That idea never made it past the page. The production code, Hollywood's moral rulebook at the time, made it nearly impossible to portray a woman leaving her husband for another man, no matter how noble the cause or romantic the setting. Writers Julius and Philip Epstein, along with Howard Koch, cycled through several scenarios before settling on the now legendary finale. Many believe the alternate ending was scrapped not just due to censorship, but also because it lacked the emotional weight that defined the ultimate version. Folklore even hints that Humphrey Bogart leaned toward a version where Rick sacrifices his own happiness, preserving his character's dignity. While there's no indication that alternate endings were ever filmed or previewed for viewers, the bittersweet goodbye, punctuated by the line, "We'll always have Paris," struck a chord that still resonates through film history. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956 originally ended with a gut punch. Dr. Miles Bennell, portrayed by Kevin McCarthy, stood in the middle of traffic shouting, "They're here already, you're next!" A jarring, unresolved alarm. That was Don Siegel's planned finale, mirroring Cold War tension and anxieties over creeping conformity, But after early test screenings, studio bosses at Allied Artists intervened. They insisted on a new framing device to soften the impact. Bennell now recounts his tale to doctors, who then alert the authorities. This reworked version hinted at a possible solution. Maybe the invasion could be thwarted. Siegel and McCarthy both protested, yet the studio won out. Siegel later noted the original was deemed too grim for audiences. Even with the added optimism, the central theme remained disturbing. Whispers have circulated for years that the studio worried about political fallout, especially given the film's subtext, often cited as commentary on McCarthy-era conformity. Intriguingly, the so-called original cut, minus the framing device, never saw an official release. Even Criterion's 2012 edition retained the theatrical version. And that 25-second framing segment? Still enough to alter the overall feel. A handful of movie academics see it as a prime example of Hollywood toning down its own edge. The Big Sleep. In 1946, Warner Brothers released The Big Sleep, a film noir classic notorious for its convoluted storyline. Although Raymond Chandler's original novel tied up its loose ends, the movie's adaptation leaned into ambiguity, partly due to reshoots that boosted Lauren Bacall's role and her on-screen chemistry with Humphrey Bogart. No complete alternate ending was filmed, but rearranged scenes and added moments altered the atmosphere, leaving multiple plot threads unresolved. Some insiders claimed that the studio prioritized the star power of Bogart and Bacall above narrative clarity. Reviewers were divided. Some admired its brooding style and precise dialogue. Others found the perplexity infuriating. Even Chandler reportedly couldn't identify the culprit behind one of the murders. Director Howard Hawks appeared unfazed, suggesting the film was best if people didn't overcomplicate it. Many years on, film historians still debate whether it was clever audacity or a remarkable mishmash. High Noon. In 1952, High Noon roused political commentary with its stark depiction of moral fortitude, but the ending viewers saw wasn't the only one floated behind closed doors. Screenwriter Carl Foreman, under scrutiny from the House Un-American Activities Committee, infused his sense of betrayal into the screenplay. According to researcher Glenn Frankel, Foreman envisioned the film as an allegory for the Red Scare, where the marshal's desertion by the townspeople mirrored his own ostracism in Hollywood. Early drafts emphasized this isolation, adopting a more cynical edge that reportedly tested how far the Production Code Administration could be pushed. Though no verified script reveals Will Kane dying, some accounts hint at a scenario in which the marshal's death was considered, only to be shelved as too grim for Cold War audiences. The Production Code needed no specifics to intervene. Its broad principle discouraged endings that undermined law, order, or moral certainty. So when the final scene was altered to show Kane discarding his badge in the dirt and walking away, it struck a middle ground. The hero endures, yet the takeaway remains. Doing the right thing can be lonely, and sometimes the establishment isn't worth saving. Gary Cooper, who portrayed Kane, supported Foreman during the Blacklist ordeal, though contrary to certain rumors, there's scant evidence he lobbied for an alternate finale. Most disputes arose among Foreman, director Fred Zinnemann, and the studio. Still, hushed claims of alternate cuts, potentially for worldwide markets, have lingered, though none has emerged. The completed vision became iconic, though it sparked controversy. Critics disagreed. Bosley Crowther of the New York Times applauded its moral conviction, while others felt the compromise diluted the film's political impact. In the end, High Noon did more than stage a lone stand, it lived one. Gilda. In 1946, Columbia Pictures unveiled Gilda, a film noir drenched in glamour yet boiling with psychological tension. On screen, Rita Hayworth and Glenn Ford played two people ensnared in lust and distrust. Off-screen, the finale turned into a showdown between artistic aims and Hollywood's moral sentinels. Multiple cinema experts say that initial drafts had Gilda and Johnny going separate ways, a harsher, more suitable resolution for a tale defined by manipulation. But that version never reached the public. Under the strict eye of the Production Code Administration, which demanded moral closure, Columbia overhauled the conclusion. Instead of parting, the final cut showed the pair reconciling, effectively sidelining the emotional torment that powered their bond. This revision was about more than censorship. Some historians propose it also guarded Hayworth's star status. By the mid-40s, she was Columbia's crown jewel, and an ending leaving Gilda alone or morally gray might have clashed with her polished image. Hayworth supposedly disliked the revised finale. Biographers note she felt it undercut the character's authenticity. Later critics also criticized the stark shift, from noir's dark undertones to a tidy happily ever after. Film scholar Jeanine Basinger pointed out that the production code didn't just censor plots, it altered character development and even entire film categories. In Gilda's case, it may have wiped away the more resonant ending. Speculation persists about the original conclusion. Was it too grim for audiences recovering from war, or just too realistic? In any event, the cut that reached audiences reveals as much about old Hollywood's necessity for compromise as it does about the film itself. The Manurion Candidate. The Manurion Candidate, released in 1962, triggered Cold War jitters with its unsettling portrait of mind control and political murder. Directed by John Frankenheimer and starring Frank Sinatra and Angela Lansbury, the film was pulled from circulation soon after President John F. Kennedy's assassination in November of 1963. The timing sparked speculation and theories multiplied. Some hinted that Sinatra, a known acquaintance of the Kennedy family, subtly supported the decision out of respect. Officially, United Artists blamed the film's disturbing thematic parallels to real events. In spite of persistent folklore, no expanded or more explicit ending was ever confirmed. The iteration that reached cinemas in 1962 was the only recognized cut. Nevertheless, its sudden vanishing act nurtured rumors of a suppressed version, maybe too provocative for the national climate. For over 2 decades, the Manurion Candidate grew into something of a cinematic specter. When it returned in the late 1980s, viewers got the same original cut restored and reissued. Its comeback rekindled public intrigue and scholarly discussion. Was the film simply ahead of its time? Too uncomfortable in its accuracy? Critics now celebrate it as an audacious artifact of Cold War storytelling, while its disappearance remains one of Hollywood's more baffling cases of self-censorship, defined by historical shockwaves and prevailing sentiment. Rebel Without a Cause. Rebel Without a Cause almost ended on a far darker note than what audiences saw in theaters. While Plato's death in the final act remained consistent across drafts, whispers have lingered for years that director Nicholas Ray initially toyed with a version where Jim and Judy didn't survive either. Though no final script confirms this, some production insiders claimed early concepts leaned into a much bleaker resolution, one that would have stripped the film of its eventual glimmer of hope. Studio pressure played a major role in steering the narrative away from that edge. Warner Brothers was wary of alienating the very teenage demographic it hoped to attract, especially amid rising concerns about youth rebellion in the 1950s. The Hays Code also loomed large, shaping how violence and moral outcomes were portrayed, even if it didn't directly dictate who lived or died. In the end, Ray revised the climax to keep Jim and Judy alive, preserving a fragile sense of redemption. The theatrical version, released to U.S. audiences on October 27, 1955, became a cultural touchstone. Still, the idea of an alternate all-fatal ending continues to spark debate, an unsettling what-if that lingers in the film's legacy. The Searchers. The Searchers, released in 1956, concludes with John Wayne's character, Ethan Edwards, sparing his kidnapped niece and walking off alone, an image etched into film history. But behind that legendary doorway shot lies a swirl of speculation. Certain cinema analysts have proposed that early drafts might have depicted Ethan killing Debbie, in line with his character's darker impulses. While no filmed alternate ending exists, the notion has ignited decades of debate about Ford's original vision. Rumors persist that Ford toyed with a bleaker finale to underscore the harshness of frontier justice, but ultimately chose ambiguity over finality. No alternate cut has surfaced, yet the conversations endure. Was Ethan's redemption ever truly the focus? Some Like It Hot. Some Like It Hot, released in 1959, is celebrated for its sharp humor and that unforgettable final line, "Nobody's perfect." But behind the scenes, the ending was anything but guaranteed. Co-writer I.A.L. Diamond reportedly wrestled to find a fitting conclusion, and the now famous line was initially tossed in as a joke during script revisions. It remained not because executives adored it, but because test audiences erupted with laughter. Grapevine talk has endured for ages about discarded drafts that leaned into a more serious wrap-up. Some even claim the characters were meant to face arrest for their disguises. While no script confirms this, the concept continues to float around in film circles. Meanwhile, production was hardly smooth. Marilyn Monroe's challenges on set were widely publicized, with some claiming she needed dozens of takes for simple dialogue. One oft-repeated anecdote involves her struggling to say, "Where's the bourbon?" a moment that reportedly took more than 40 tries. Whether embellished or not, such stories only heighten the film's mystique. Despite the turmoil, the resulting picture preserved the movie's buoyant tone, securing it a top spot on the American Film Institute's 2000 list of the 100 funniest American movies. The Bridge on the River Kwai. Released in 1957, The Bridge on the River Kwai ended with a literal bang. But that wasn't the original plan. In Pierre Boulier's novel from 1952, the bridge stands, the sabotage fails, and the story leans heavily into the moral contradictions of war. Director David Lean, however, opted for a more explosive finale, where the bridge is destroyed in a dramatic chain reaction. The change didn't just rewrite the ending, it reversed the novel's message. Screenwriters Carl Foreman and Michael Wilson, both uncredited at the time due to blacklisting, helped shape the new climax. It has been reported that the studio backed the shift, possibly fearing that a failed mission might feel too grim for post-war audiences. Alec Guinness, who portrayed Colonel Nicholson, reportedly had concerns about how the ending redefined his character's arc, from principled officer to a man undone by pride. Others guessed that he preferred a quieter downfall. But Lean remained committed to the spectacle. The result? A scene that became one of the most iconic in war cinema, helping the film win 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and the Best Actor for Guinness. Still, various film experts argue the original ending delivered a more potent anti-war critique. The film's version, while unforgettable, favored cinematic impact over philosophical depth. It's a textbook case of old Hollywood rewriting a story, not just for the screen, but for the moment. It's a Wonderful Life. Released in December of 1946, It's a Wonderful Life became one of the most beloved holiday films in American cinema, but not overnight. While the iconic ending, with George Bailey rescued by his community, seems certain now, earlier drafts of the script toyed with different moods. These variations didn't drastically alter the plot, but they did flirt with a more somber resolution. Capra and his co-writers reportedly tested scenarios where George's despair lingered, and the angel Clarence stepped in later. Various historians propose that Capra, a World War II veteran himself, drew on the post-war emotional fatigue of the nation. However, there's no solid proof that a script ever existed in which George ended up institutionalized or without redemption. That notion appears more rumor than reality. Liberty Films, Capra's independent company, produced the picture, while RKO Radio Pictures handled its release. Despite the heartwarming theme, it struggled commercially and didn't become a seasonal mainstay until many years later, when frequent television airings in the 1970s gave it renewed popularity. Even without a filmed alternate ending, the creative push and pull behind the scenes, balancing sorrow with optimism, shaped the concluding edit. The version audiences know today wasn't merely a feel-good angle. It was a conscious shift away from the deeper gloom seen in early drafts. And while no darker finale was ever shot, the persistent whispers of one continue to arouse interest among fans and film scholars alike. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.